British schools.
Okay. All right. Zoe, George, Mark, North, Thomas, kia ora to you both. Thank you for your time. Wonderful. I'm Wallace Chapman, back tomorrow, 3:45. Till then, bye.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei. It's called Big Air, and Kiwi snowboarder Zoi Sadowski-Synnott is flying high with her second Olympic medal. This one's silver. We talked to her parents who are buzzing. New rules are revealed for self-isolating returnees, including temporary passes out to visit dying relatives, the doctor, or a day in court. Chris Hipkins is live. Would you believe it? Rats are keeping the cheese factory open. We talked to a company about phase 2 plans, and businesses benched due to red light restrictions. The police roll out their top cop as the Parliament protest rolls on. What's not moving right now, though, is the illegally parked cars. But that could all be about to change. Don't forget, you can catch us on Sky, Channel 83.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Good afternoon, kia ora tātou, ko Iwi Ashton tēnei. The Police Commissioner has issued an ultimatum to protesters to remove vehicles now that are blocking roads around Parliament's precinct. Andrew Costa says the impact on residents and business is no longer tenable and vehicles will soon be towed, although he gave no time frame. Mr Costa says anyone who tries to stop the vehicles from being removed will be arrested.
We have offered alternatives that would enable roads to be cleared. However, protesters have not taken up that offer, nor have they shown any concern for the impact of their activities. Police will continue to give protesters the opportunity to remove their vehicles, to do this voluntarily, but time is fast running out for this to occur.
Andrew Costa says police have asked the Defence Force to assist them with the towing. He says towed vehicles may not be returned anytime soon. Wellingtonians' patience towards the protesters at Parliament is waning. The protest is in its 8th day, with the blockade spreading across more streets near Parliament grounds. People have told RNZ they're finding it an inconvenience and wonder when it will end.
I think it'd take another storm like the one on the weekend to get them going, but honestly I wouldn't be surprised if it's still here for another week or two.
Oh yeah, bus is half full. My office is pretty empty. We have a lot of people avoiding the area, especially vulnerable people. I've got friends that are pregnant that just won't leave the house pretty much, won't come into town.
Hopefully they'll give up and go home soon.
Meanwhile, police are monitoring a protest in central Christchurch. Tents have been set up in Cranmer Square, a location frequently used by Destiny Church and the Freedoms and Rights Coalition. Snowboarder Zoi Sadowski-Synnott has narrowly missed out on claiming her second gold medal of the Beijing Winter Olympics, winning silver in the women's big air competition. Sadowski-Synnott led after the first 2 rounds, but failed to land her final jump and was edged out by defending champion Austrian Anna Gasser. And it all came down to the final run of the day.
It comes down to this. Zoi Sadowski-Synnott, a golden slope, sitting in the silver medal. And here we go, regular foot rider coming in. Will she go for the 12? She goes for it. She goes for the 12. She does not land it. So that means Anna Gasser will claim the gold. Zoi Sadowski-Synnott will grab the silver. And Marasi Kokomo will grab the bronze.
That commentary courtesy of Sky Sport. It's Sadowski-Synnott's second medal of the Games after she became the first New Zealander to win a Winter Olympic gold medal with victory in the slopestyle event last week. Auckland health authorities say up to 70% of the people queuing at testing sites don't need to get tested. Waits of up to 2 hours have been reported for the second day in a row as the Northern Region Health Coordination Centre grapples with very high demand. Katie Todd reports.
The centre's asking people to stay away from testing sites unless they have symptoms, are a close contact, have been at a location of interest or have been asked to get tested by a health official. Its Chief Clinical Officer Andrew Old says the number of people arriving without symptoms has jumped from 50% to 70%. Health officials say unnecessary testing could delay results for people who urgently need them. At the Balmoral testing site, the queue has eased, but at the Botany site, a long line of cars is disrupting bus services.
New Zealand's new COVID case numbers have dropped from yesterday's record. There are another 744 COVID-19 cases in the community today, compared to yesterday's 981 infections. And close to 6,000 homes throughout the North Island are still without power due to outages caused by Cyclone Zoi. One customer has now been 3 days without a hot shower and says he's been kept in the dark on when his power might be restored. Leah Tibbett with this report.
PowerCo still has more than 5,000 customers without power, nearly half of them in Bay of Plenty. Customers in Taranaki, Coromandel, Thames, Waihi, South Waikato, Whanganui, Wairarapa and Manawatu are also out. In Auckland, Vector says it's working to reconnect the 700 homes in the north and west of the region by the end of today. Lee resident Michael Cray says he is frustrated with Vector after 3 days of no communication regarding his power outage. Mr. Cray says he would like Vector to be upfront instead of promising to fix it as soon as possible.
Now to sport and more news about our favourite snowboarder at the moment, Zoi Sadowski-Synnott, who pulled out a trick she only learnt a few weeks ago in a bid to claim her second gold medal at the Beijing Winter Olympics. Sadowski-Synnott led after the first 2 rounds of the women's big air competition but failed to land her final jump and was edged out by defending champion Austrian Anna Gasser, having to settle for silver.
Dropping into that last one, I knew I had to give it everything I had, and I only learnt that like a month and a half ago, so I wanted to land it but took a little too much speed.
Meanwhile, alpine skier Alice Robinson is set to compete in the downhill shortly. She'll be the 23rd of 36 skiers to go. The White Ferns are on target to chase down the 270 run total they need to beat India in the second one-day cricket international in Queenstown. A short time ago, New Zealand was 172 for 3 after 31 overs, with Amelia Kerr unbeaten on 66. And the Danish footballer Christian Eriksen has played in his first match 8 months after suffering a heart attack. Eriksen suffered the cardiac arrest while playing for Denmark against Finland in June. He played in a friendly for English Premier League side Brentford, which he joined last month after being released by Inter Milan. And work has started on transforming the famous Hollywood sign in Los Angeles following the Rams Super Bowl win, with the LA mayor saying the sign will temporarily read Rams House. And that's the news.
Don't mess with the neighbours.
If I go outside, I have to walk through the middle of protesters. They're not masked, so I don't think that it is fair.
Keeping it tight at the Winter Olympics.
We have the sort of unwritten rule that we go radio silent when she's in competition mode.
And knowing what to do.
For heaven's sake, get the booster today or make an appointment. There's no point in having it in a few weeks after you've become sick.
Your radio booster. Morning report weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
We're funded through New Zealand On Air. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. First, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumarunui. Fine, some cloud in the west tomorrow morning. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine, isolated showers this afternoon and again tomorrow afternoon and evening. For Whanganui and Taihape to Kapiti Coast, fine apart from patchy drizzle tomorrow morning. Wellington and Wairarapa, mainly fine, areas of morning and evening cloud tomorrow. For Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland, fine and cloudy periods, isolated showers developing in Westland and Buller tomorrow. For Canterbury, Southern Lakes, Central and North Otago and Dunedin, fine today, scattered rain tomorrow morning, clearing to fine tomorrow afternoon, but the odd shower lingering about the Canterbury High Country. For Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, rain about southern Fiordland and Stewart Island, spreading elsewhere this evening, becoming fine tomorrow morning. And for Te Kohu, the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy with the odd shower. 8 minutes past 5 is the time. We'll have more news headlines for you at 5:30.
Kia ora rā, Evie. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Kiwi snowboarder Zoi Sadowski-Synnott is flying high with a second medal, a silver, at the Winter Olympics, this time in the big air competition. The 20-year-old became New Zealand's first Winter Olympian gold medalist last week when she won the slopestyle. After a stellar first run today, she was edged out of the top spot, literally at the last minute.
She goes for it! She goes for the 12! She does not land it, so that means at this point Anna Gasser will claim the gold. Zoi Sadowski-Synnott will grab the silver.
Completing her set of medals after a bronze last time around.
Honestly, it kind of feels like any other comp, except I know that it's the Olympics, and I came here to put down my best tricks and almost got there, and I'm stoked with the result.
That audio courtesy of Sky Sport, who parents Sean and Robin watched on in Wanaka.
It's always bloody stressful. But yeah, so happy for her and what she's done. And so happy for the rest of the girls.
Sean, what do you like
really
watching
proud
on?
Of, you know what? I was pretty calm and composed today. I drank a lot of water. I'm not allowed to drink until after the event nowadays, apparently. So yeah, no, totally just in awe of what she's pulled off. She's got a full medal cabinet now, and hopefully she's been an inspiration to a lot of other young people, male or female. Get out there, believe your dreams, you can make it happen.
That first run was absolutely stellar, wasn't it?
Yeah, look, Dylan was sitting there giving me, and he's the expert, Zoe's brother. He said, "Oh, she scored that well because," and he ran off a whole lot of stuff I didn't understand. But it was a really clean run. She was very composed, huge amount of height, amplitude as they call, and yeah, just really impressed with the fact she could just pull it out of the bag again.
What are you going to say to her when you get a chance to speak to her?
We'll just say, hey, well done.
Well done, girl.
Go enjoy your free riding at natural selection next week.
And ultimately enjoy your freedom. You know?
Did you have a chance to speak to her last night?
Yes. Robin did.
We did. We were arranging logistics and figuring out what her next, what the plan was. So quick conversation. She was definitely kind of shattered, exhausted, but ready to just have a good night's sleep and get on to the next one.
Have either of you two stood at the top of that run, one of those runs that she does?
No, and actually when we went to Pyeongchang, when we walked by that big air, I looked up and I thought, oh my God, if I stood at the top of that, I don't even think I could stand. You know, my legs would shake, let alone go down it. Because it's something like 16 stories high. It's crazy.
How does she do it?
Good question. Lots of practice.
Does nothing scare her, though?
And nerves of steel.
Oh, yeah, no, I know. I've got the answer for this one.
No.
I'll tell you what scares her is
Nothing.
What scares her is the possibility that she might not to go get the opportunity to do a comp that she wants to do.
And the media used to scare her.
The media scares her, terrifies her.
But bloody nerves of steel.
Nerves of steel. Sean and Robin, Zoi Sadowski-Synnott's parents there. Under new government rules, some returnees can get a temporary pass out of self-isolation to visit a terminally ill relative, go to court or get medical attention. And sports teams or performers who get special approval can train or rehearse outside of self-iso. From 28th February, the first wave of returnees can bypass MIQ for self-isolation. Travellers will now have a choice of 3 different pre-flight COVID tests. Vaccination requirements apply to anyone 17 years and older. Returnees must travel directly to their accommodation, but no shared facilities like backpackers or hostels are allowed. And they'll have to complete 2 rapid antigen tests during 7 full days of isolation. Ko taku manuhiri nai nei ko Chris Hipkins, COVID Response Minister. Tēnā koe e te minita.
Tēnā koe, Lisa.
So who's going to make decisions about who gets a temporary pass and based on what?
Ultimately, as we move into this new phase of COVID response, there is going to be a lot more personal responsibility here. So unlike when people needed a pass out of MIQ, for example, to visit a dying relative, there won't be that degree of compliance when people are isolating at home. It is a different way of thinking about COVID. I think everyone is getting used to the fact that we're thinking about COVID-19 differently now, and people will be needing to take more personal responsibility for the decisions that they take.
So, Minister, just to be clear, if you wish to leave self-isolation and you're supposed to be in there for 7 days and return these negative tests, but you want to go and do one of the things that we've mentioned, that's entirely on you. You choose to do it, you make the decision, you leave the house.
That's right, but you'd have to be, in order to not be committing an offence or committing an infringement, you'd need to be doing it consistent with the guidance that's been put out around what you could leave for and why and so on.
So why isolate at all then?
Well, because ultimately, we want people to be isolating. We want to stop them potentially spreading COVID-19. But we have to get used to the fact that there will be more people with COVID-19 in the community. And so the people who are coming into New Zealand from abroad will be treated the same as people who are close contacts or who have COVID-19 here in New Zealand. And so it's about really aligning the risk rather than, treating the risk as if it's different when it's less likely to be.
Minister, I noticed your media release said there are 2 rapid antigen tests. They will have to report the results. Report to who and how?
They'll be given instructions on exactly how to do that.
Have you set up a system or is that still coming?
No, the systems have been established, and those who get the tests will be told exactly what they need to do with them.
So do you know what the system is? Do they upload the results online? Do they call someone? How does it work?
There will be an ability for people to upload them online, but we also have to recognise that not everyone's going to be able to do that. So there'll be systems available for those who aren't digitally connected.
I'm just wondering, are you going to make a booster a requirement to maintain a vaccination certificate? You may have heard Professor Sir David Skegg saying we've got to stop saying that people have had 2 shots are fully vaccinated because they're not.
We haven't made decisions on that at this point.
Are you considering changing the requirements for full vaccination to include the booster?
Of course, we keep those things under, constant review. At the moment, our priority is on getting people to, get out there and get their boosters. We're sitting at over 60% of the people who are eligible as of today have had their boosters. I'd like to see that number climbing higher. There's still about 1 million people who are eligible as of today who haven't had a booster yet. Now, some of those have only recently become eligible for a booster, though. But I would like, a real focus on people getting the booster, not necessarily because they feel they have to, but because, it is the best protection that they could have against an Omicron outbreak.
But given that, and given the science tells us that you require a 3rd injection to get the maximum protection to be fully vaccinated against Omicron, why don't you change the vaccination certificate requirements to reflect that and everything you've been telling us?
We haven't made decisions about that at the moment. The vaccine passes all expire at the beginning or in June, and so we will make decisions well in advance of that date around what the requirements to renew a vaccine pass, if it's still required at that point, what the requirements to renew a vaccine pass would be.
Given that you've just said that there's about 1 million people who are eligible to be boosted but have not yet, do you not need to do this to encourage them over the line?
As I said, the vaccine passes issued last year, they ultimately expire in June. And so we'll make decisions in plenty of time before, we're not going to cancel the passes that are already out there. If we still need passes beyond June, and if we decide that booster requirements are needed for people to renew their passes, then we'll give people plenty of notice of that.
Do you think it's likely we are going to need to renew vaccination passes then?
Look, I've always said that I envisage we do still need to have vaccine passes beyond the expiry of the current one, that it's likely that a booster requirement would be needed. Whether we still need them or not, look, your crystal ball is as good as mine in that regard.
So 11:59 tonight, we're going to move to phase 2. How many rats have you handed out to businesses?
We've got about over 7 million rat tests in the country. I don't have a tell exactly where they are and who they've been given to. We know that.
So have you given any out to businesses who are critical?
Some bigger businesses have been given an advanced supply of that so that they're ready to do tests. In the case of smaller and medium-sized businesses, though, there's a process where their staff will be able to pick up the tests when they need them.
So you've said again in your media statements that you've got 122 million coming of these rapid antigen tests. So why don't you make them available to any business or any individual who wants them?
At the moment, our focus is on making sure that the people who need to be tested can be tested, but it's also about making sure that we're reducing the risk of a spread of COVID-19 to New Zealanders who are trying very hard not to get it. And so our our exemption scheme for those who are on isolation is about saying, people should only really be going to work when they're a close contact of someone. It's
because you've got a shortage of tests, isn't it, Minister? If we cut straight to the chase, you can say it any way you like, but the reason not everyone is getting access and not all businesses are getting access is because you simply do not have the numbers of tests to enable you to do that right now, correct?
No, if we had a whole lot more tests, I would not say to businesses that people should be able to go back to work with a negative COVID-19 test unless they absolutely have to, because ultimately that puts other people in their workplace at more risk of getting COVID-19. We accept that in some cases, to keep the lights on, to keep the critical infrastructure working, to keep the supply chains open, people may need to go back to work even when it's not desirable for them to do so.
What about keeping afloat, though, Minister, financially and, the social fallout as well as economic if these businesses don't have access to this test and cannot keep operating because all their staff are on the bench isolating? What about that?
Well, the biggest to that business would be an outbreak of COVID-19 in that business, which meant that all of the staff would then be home for a much longer period of time, potentially. So businesses, in the conversations that I've been having with them are doing those maths for themselves, and in many cases are saying, look, we would only ever use this test in order to go back to work as an absolute last resort because we want to keep the staff who don't have COVID as free from COVID as much as we possibly can.
Thanks for your time this evening. That's COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins. It is 5:20 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai. E haere ake nei, coming up, the government defends its MIQ system in the High Court. No longer tenable, the country's top cop has renewed calls for protesters to move their vehicles off the roads blocking central Wellington streets to bring an end to major disruption. They've been there for more than a week and pleas to move them, for them to move parking to nearby free parking have been ignored. Police Commissioner Andrew Costa says tow companies have so far been reluctant to help. So he's asked the Defence Force to help tow the vehicles away and is waiting to hear back, but doesn't have a time frame for when they'll be gone.
It could take us a period of time. We remain of the view that there is an opportunity for this to be resolved by the protesters doing the right thing. We are creating an incentive for people to move their cars. If they move their cars voluntarily, take them to Sky Stadium, we'll have no more interest in those vehicles. However, if they fail to remove the cars and we have to do it for them, they will not get those vehicles back anytime soon.
Meanwhile, patience towards the protesters appears to be wearing thin. The so-called anti-mandate protest is now in its 8th day, and the crowd has also grown since it started. Our reporter Jake McKee and cameraman Angus Drever have the latest.
The protest has swarmed and spilled over more ground. Some Wellingtonians are feeling pretty over it and the eerie presence that's hanging over the city.
Oh yeah, bus is half full. My office is pretty empty. We have a lot of people avoiding the area, especially vulnerable people. I've got friends that are pregnant that just won't leave the house pretty much, won't come into town.
I think social media has to take a lot of responsibility for the weird ideas that are abroad. Hopefully they'll give up and go home soon.
Oh man, I think it'd take another storm like the one on the weekend to get them going. But honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they're still here for another week or two.
The protest is entrenched in the public service end of town. Not only Parliament, but the High Court, Court of Appeal, the National Library and various ministries. So for those who need to still come to this area, it's by foot only. Buses aren't stopping here, and as we found out, it's not easy to drive around. So we're now driving down Mulgrave Street, and if we wanted to get across this other side of Thorndon, across to Hill Street, there's no way. Just up ahead here, we're about to turn onto Aiken Street, and as you see when we turn this corner, it's blocked. About 100 metres down, the road is blocked, fenced off, cars are stopped, and they are occupying the road. These cars have been here for days now. This is day 8 of the protest, and there is no sign that they're leaving. And so it's back onto Mulgrave Street. We need to find another way across the city. There's no place that we can get around. But as you head up here, we're just about to get to the bus station, usually full of bus and commuters. But no, it's an occupation station. These scenes are spreading. Victoria University's Pipitea campus is now a tent city, and it's leaking into the surrounding streets. Beyond the hundreds of vehicles here lining Molesworth Street and Bowen Street, you can see tents piled in the Parliament lawn. People have made it their home now for the past week. So what happens now with these hundreds of vehicles that are part of this blockade? It's day 8 and they've been here ever since. Just down here on the corner of Molesworth and Hill Streets, the blockade pretty much ends. Since the start, there's been talk of bringing in towing companies to remove them, but those we've spoken to didn't want to comment, seemingly not wanting to be involved. But we did speak to one. He said he's had threats from overseas, people in similar protests, just from the fact he's a towing company here in Wellington. He said he would get involved if he could. Other things playing in, he doesn't actually have the proper resources to tow some of these vehicles. They're not just cars, there's buses and vans as well. And so Sky Stadium opened up the ground floor of their car park for some of the long haul protesters. Those that have been blocking the roads, they've been invited here to come park for free. Police put vouchers on their cars last night advising them that they can come, and they're not going to get charged. They've had day trippers that have come, but they're going to have to pay. But by our count, most people aren't here. There's only 41 cars. This ground floor can take 450 vehicles. 41 for 450 spaces. National Party leader Christopher Luxon is backing the Prime Minister's decision to steer clear of the protesters. Some are carrying signs calling for the death of politicians.
That protest out there, we respect people's right to protest, but we expect them to do it within the rules, and that's not been happening. And so we're a party of law and order, and so at this point we wouldn't be doing that.
He's even taking action to boost his own security and has changed his living arrangements in the capital. But he says it isn't about him, it's about everyday Wellingtonians who are doing it tough as they navigate life around the protesters.
And if you were listening to that story on radio, do check out the video. It'll go on our webpage. And homai o whakaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira ānei na kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. What do you make of this protest dragging on? What should happen next? Police are saying that tow companies are reluctant to get involved. And also, keen on your thoughts regarding the new self-isolation rules for returnees. They get to decide if they get an early pass out for medical reasons, to visit a dying relative, or for court appearances, for example. It's on their shoulders to choose. Pātui mai, text me, tweet us at 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Proportionate to the risks the country faced. The defence the government put up today over a legal challenge of its MIQ system and the limitations it put on offshore New Zealanders. The Grounded Kiwis group has been arguing in the High Court that border restrictions have breached the Bill of Rights. Today, lawyers for the government said people have to be alive and well to exercise those rights, and it was appropriate for a precautionary approach to be taken. Nita Blake-Person has the story.
Stories of hardship, heartache and trauma have been at the heart of Grounded Kiwis' case against the government that its MIQ system kept people stranded overseas for far too long. Today, the government laid out its defence, but not without first acknowledging the suffering of those affected.
Like many others, they have had to make sacrifices, and we acknowledge that. And they've endured hardship because of the pandemic, also like many others.
Lawyer Aideen Boadita Cormacan told the court they weren't denying those overseas experiences, but she said the MIQ system was set up in a pandemic and not an ideal world.
New Zealanders' right to return has been at the very heart of the system that has been designed. This system is about bringing New Zealanders home. And the objective of that system was both to prevent the harm of the pandemic and to protect those Section 18(2) rights.
COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins is the primary respondent to grounded Kiwis case. Boadita Cormacan today shared his affidavit arguing the limitations were proportionate to the risk COVID posed.
Further, when considering the impact of our public health measures on various interests, I have given particular weight to the interest of protecting the public health of all people in New Zealand because of the significant and potentially irreversible consequences of not sufficiently protecting that interest.
The defence continued that the constraints on MIQ were real, but overstated by grounded Kiwis with high and low periods of demand. The MIQ system is costing $1 billion annually, and more than 200,000 people have been through the system.
The government made the choice to prioritise life and health and to look at in the round, so my learned friend has talked about a bifocal lens. This is really a wide-angle lens that has been brought to bear in these circumstances. The respondents had to look at human rights of all people in New Zealand, and they had to look at achieving an outcome that enabled the least impact on people's lives and health and the socio-economic impacts that follow from that.
Speaking at Parliament this afternoon, Chris Hipkins says for most of the time MIQ has operated, demand has well and truly outstripped supply. And he says the very presence of the system has created difficult trade-offs.
I've looked at this over and over again over the last 18 months to 2 years, and there is no way of getting a system that's going to keep everybody happy.
The court hearing wrapped up this afternoon. Victoria University's Associate Professor of Law, Dean Knight, says it's a fascinating and important case.
The court is sitting there trying to say, did the government get the balance right when trying to protect the community here, the life, health and well-being of the people here, and does the public good of MIQ outweigh the detriment of those unable to return home, especially in the light of reasonably feasible alternative approaches that are open to government at the time.
A potentially precedent-setting legal landmark which hopefully won't have to be tested again anytime soon.
Nita Blake-Person reporting there. A few of you getting in touch about the protests and also self-isolation and rapid antigen tests. Vivian says, could someone persuade whoever supplied the portaloos to the people outside Parliament to take them away? Giving them no option for these facilities would make life more difficult for them. Beats me why they were given them in the first place. Well, I think, Vivian, some of the shops were getting hassled and, you know, what could happen if they take away the loos and there's nowhere to go? And this person on rapid antigen tests, woefully too few tests. 5 million New Zealanders plus visitors means government will be well short at 20 million. That's only 4 each over months and months. Still no lessons learned from Australia. Government's got 122 million on order, they say, but with no due date for all of them to get here. Kia ora, e te iwi e Hariaki nei e checkpoint. Rats keep the wheels turning at the cheese factory as business ramps up for phase 2 of the Omicron plan. Should sitting your practical driver's licence be a critical service and exempt from vaccine passes? And businesses feeling the burn under COVID red light settings. Homai o whakaaro. Do get in touch with your feedback about anything you've heard on the program this evening. Text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or send us an email. checkpoint@rnz.co.nz is the address. Time for the headlines. Ko Iwi anō tēnei.
Tēnā koe Lisa. Kia ora tātou, ko Iwi Ashton tēnei. The Police Commissioner has issued an ultimatum to protesters to remove vehicles now that are blocking roads around Parliament's precinct. Andrew Costa says the impact on residents and business is no longer tenable and vehicles will soon be towed, although he gave no time frame. Mr Costa says anyone who tries to stop the vehicles from being removed will be arrested. Police are also monitoring a protest in central Christchurch. Tents have been set up in Cranmer Square, a location frequently used by Destiny Church and the Freedoms and Rights Coalition. Cranmer Square is considered a reserve, and under a council bylaw, no one can camp there. Snowboarder Zoi Sadowski-Synnott has won a silver medal at the Beijing Winter Olympics, taking second place in the big air competition. Sadowski-Synnott led after the first 2 rounds, but failed to land her final jump and was edged out by defending champion Austrian Anna Gasser. The COVID Response Minister says the government will make decisions about renewing vaccine passes before June. Chris Hipkins told Checkpoint that vaccine passes could include booster requirements. New Zealand's new COVID case numbers have dropped from yesterday's record. There are another 744 COVID-19 cases in the community today, compared to yesterday's 981 infections. Meanwhile, Auckland health authorities say up to 70% of the people queuing at testing sites don't need to get tested. Close to 6,000 homes throughout the North Island are still without power due to outages caused by Cyclone Zoi. The head of the Catholic Order, St John of God in Oceania, has apologised to the survivors of historical abuse at Maryland's school in Christchurch. Brother Timothy Graham is giving evidence to the Abuse and Care Inquiry in Auckland. And Canadian police have been given more tools to imprison or fine protesters and protect critical infrastructure as anti-vaccine mandate protests across the country continue. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 6 o'clock.
Nā mihi iwi, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa nai nei ko Nona Peltier, who's here to talk business. So Nona, the number of people crossing the border last year was the lowest in 50 years. No surprises there, I suppose, but what are the numbers?
Well, in addition to that particular statistic, we also had our first migration loss in 9 years. So there was a net loss of 3,900 people last year, and that compares with a gain of 36,800 in 2020. So the number of people leaving, though, have been mostly non-citizens. Those people living overseas made up 45% of the people who came to New Zealand in 2020, and that compared with just 14% of returning New Zealanders back in 2019. So a lot of numbers there. But what it basically tells us is that before the pandemic, we had 14.2 million people crossing our border. And last year, we had 826,400.
Wowza. Now, here's another thing that will make people raise their eyebrows and go, that's me. So most people are apparently working overtime without pay for the extra hours. What does this tell us about workplace culture?
Yeah, well, it tells us that the overtime culture remains rife in New Zealand. Yes, in trades and in the industrial sector, workers aren't being rewarded for the extra work they're putting in. A survey, according to a organization called One Staff. They're an industrial recruiting agency. So we're talking really here about industrial workers, just this particular survey. It found 2/3 of their employees surveyed received only their normal hourly rate for any overtime they did. And that was in any particular month, instead of penal rates that other people particularly may enjoy. So One Staff, this is the company that did the survey, they said that there was a big income difference. So apparently 60% of the people that were in the survey do work regular overtime hours. They're just not being paid. And they said, look, this is an issue for employers as much as it is for employees, because through the last 2 years, because of the pandemic, the pressures put on people, the additional work that people are doing, not just on the job at work, but through, at home and so on. People really need a break, and they need to be rewarded for the hard yards they're putting in. So warning for businesses there too, especially now with very low unemployment. It's time to pay up.
And Nona, should we take a trot around the market numbers?
Yeah, well, we ended down, that's the NZX Top 50 Index, we ended down just 12 points to 11,938. That's a very small drop compared with what we've been seeing, not just here in New Zealand, but internationally. There is a lot of jitters around the world with the potential war breaking out there between Russia and Ukraine. So Asian markets were a little bit worried there, not just that, because of inflation as well as rising interest rates. The New Zealand dollar, though, ticked up a little bit this afternoon, 66.3 US cents, 93 Australian and 48.9 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier there with business. A top cheese company is relying on rats to keep it going as New Zealand heads into phase 2 of the Omicron response. Whitestone Cheese has sourced the rapid antigen tests itself and is waiting to be rubber stamped as a critical business. Under the Test to Work scheme, critical staff who are close contacts of cases can bypass isolation as long as they return a daily negative rat test. Now, the aim is to keep food production and critical infrastructure operating as Omicron spreads. But for Whitestone, it's been a maze of rules and an expense to get this far. And the company's managing director is Simon Berry, and he joins us now. Kia ora, Simon.
Yeah, hi, Lisa.
Hey, tell us, what's your plan and where did you get your rat tests from?
We got the rat test from a New Zealand supplier called SoberCheck, and got them online and paid up front. We still haven't received our full consignment. We've received about a third of them, and we still don't have enough. If we're going to be imposed on daily restriction or daily testing, we won't have many to last us at all, and they're costing a pretty penny. So we bought them privately, and now we're waiting for government advice on when we can be supplied some.
So you have actually filled out the forms and asked to be regarded as a critical business. So what is your plan to continue operating? How do you think you'll use the tests that you've got?
We're already using them now to keep COVID out. With the government response, it's more like once it's arrived or you've got a close contact, then you get assigned them. Well, we're keeping a step ahead of that and saying, well, we want to keep it out. Anyone that's going to a potential exposure event, any staff member that, say, goes to a wedding, we test them before they come back on site. So we're trying to keep a step ahead of it to keep it out. And then as this wave is coming through, we've got plans in place we're already in separate bubbles, but using those rat tests to prove or to keep it out and keep those ones isolated. And the sooner we do it, the better.
So how much do you reckon it's cost you in time and energy and actual real money to get this far with organising for this?
We've bought about $8,000 worth of rat tests so far, and we've also bought another Safer Me program technology where that's an internal contacting trace system, and that's cost us over the next 12 months. We've signed a 12-month contract on that, and that's been $12,000 up front. So about $20,000 deep, and I've heard of other businesses that are $80,000 to $100,000 deep in preparation for this.
So, Simon, tell me about this technology. Does it basically tell you when your workers have been in contact with each other, just in case you have a scare with an infection?
So it's a lanyard system, and it records how long each lanyard has been talking to each other throughout the day. So if one member gets it can, within minutes, we can run a report and say, righto, you've had 15 minutes with this staff member, so you've got 8 close contacts, you've got 12 that are secondary contacts, and within minutes we can isolate those people, test them, and then ideally get them back to work or send them home. So it's very rapid, and it's at a level that we can know of the exposure times that they've had with each other. So then we can work, and also distance as well. So we can say this staff member has been within 2 metres of X people for so long, therefore they're considered close contacts.
What would happen if your production was shut down due to infection or a scare?
That's exactly what we're mitigating, and that's why we're investing to protect job security. And we don't want everyone sitting at home, the whole place shut down, and everyone's waiting for results. So that's the last thing. People will be at home and without jobs and without much support. So we want to prevent that from happening. So we've got micro bubbles, and with the system, it's not about proving who's with you. It's actually proving who wasn't with you. So you can say, look, those guys are safe. We've got that proof there, and that's the thing. We're fighting all these regulations and restrictions to keep operating, to keep job security going, and that's the big thing.
So you seem pretty organised, right? So do you think that business has been given enough rein to make its own plans? In short, are you being trusted to manage this?
Well, no, we don't know if we're within the scope, and that's where we're working. We're reading Ministry of Health guidelines that are updated regularly on their website. We're moving to red restrictions, phase 2 at midnight tonight. Well, they still haven't told us when we're going to be supplied rat tests. We've applied, so we've created this ourselves, and we've worked with Safer Me on the tracking program. We've got a great board that's mitigating the risk with us. And so we're working as a team to say, and also all the staff members and managers saying, how are we going to handle this? We've really put our brains together because it's a real challenge. And, we're looking at different industries, hospitality. I mean, Queenstown is on its knees. They're going to be closed by Friday. And this is just decimating. And it's so hard for businesses to figure this out when the rules are constantly changing. Like, we're just tired of all these changes and restrictions. If it was just simple, if it was like rat test, clear, come to work, that'd be great, but it's not. We've got all these minefields to work through.
So Simon, who's letting you down in this then?
I guess it's the restrictions are letting us down. That if someone's got we're basically getting to the level. It's like we want to do the best thing we can for this response, But if we've got a whole team that's sitting at home for 10 days waiting for results, well, they're not ill, they're not actually risking themselves or others within our teams. The risk is so minimal, but the cost of business, the balance is out of skew. And I think that's the real problem here, that we're getting I guess it's inexperience in terms of what it means to business, and without that understanding of those ramifications that are being imposed.
Thank you for joining us this evening. That is Whitestone Cheese Managing Director Simon Berry. So managing isolating staff will be a big hurdle for businesses as the country enters phase 2 of the COVID response. But their bigger worry is the dwindling foot traffic, with some outlets already shutting their doors. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi went to see some in Auckland.
2 years ago, Azzy and Majid opened Umdu Cafe on Karangahape Road. The timing wasn't great, to say the least, but with help from their landlord and the government, they managed to stay afloat. But with that support no longer, Azzy says it's not looking good.
So we are working after hours, we are not hiring any staff, we are cutting some of the items in the menu. We are, instead of supplying some of the ingredients, we are just making them from scratch ourselves.
The empty tables at lunch hour show the extent of their struggle. The marketing business upstairs that used to share the lease with them left last lockdown. Now the full cost falls onto them, and it's just Azzy and Majid. So if one of them gets COVID, that'll mean up to 10 days off. It's taking a huge toll.
I'm losing hope some days. I'm feeling terrible. I think the main problem for hospitality owners like me is to keep up the mental health. We have mortgages, we have kids at home, we have lives. This is not the only thing that we have. It's supposed to pay for our life, but right now we shut down the living part.
Next door is Jamal Shurgeet. He runs a cafe by himself, so there's no other option. If COVID reaches him, the cafe closes.
It's a bit stressful. I mean, I never thought about it, but if it happens, there's not much I can do. I just have to face it and take it as it comes.
Despite fewer customers, he's paying more in the kitchen as inflation starts to bite.
At least you're talking between 5, 7, even 10% increase, and I can see, because I do my shopping nearly every day, and I see the prices that have changed dramatically. And if the expenses are high and the revenue is low, it doesn't balance at the end of the day. So you just end up on giving it to the tax man.
He says there's only one solution.
There's no one to go and cry to apart from the government. I mean, the only one who, the saving angels. I mean, who are you going to look at? And I'm too old to go and rob a bank, but, it's not something that you need tomorrow. You need it like now. I mean, they said, we're going to do it in 2 weeks. 2 weeks is too late. People will be shutting their doors.
At Mexico Brito Mart, that's already the case. 2 weeks ago, they turned off the lights. Owner Nick McCaw explains they couldn't survive in red.
Just the customers didn't come. Nobody came to work in Brito Mart. Nobody came to work in the CBD. And when there's no one around, there's no one to come to your restaurant. So we tried really hard for 10 days. We tried to cut costs. We tried to find a way around it so that we might ride out this storm. But we just haven't been able to do that.
He says the only way they can reopen is with government support.
We were supported when our revenue was down 30% and when our revenue was down 40%. At the moment, it's down 50 or 80% in some cases. We just need that support again. We need it to keep our people employed, because if we lose our teams, we lose our businesses.
Nick's also part of the Brito Mart Group, which owns several other restaurants, including nightclubs AV and Saturdays and cocktail bar Caretaker. Staring down a surge in COVID cases, he says it'll be a nightmare, with the likelihood more staff will be isolating over the next few weeks. Some are already close contacts of other cases.
It's going to be a total disaster in the next few weeks. We're not going to be able to open many different businesses. Teams cannot be put together. You just can't do that. It doesn't work. Kitchens don't work by just grabbing one and putting them into another. It just doesn't work. So the truth is we're just facing a disaster even bigger than we've got today. So there's no way through that.
Despite last weekend being the 10-year anniversary of opening Mexico Britomart, instead of a celebration, the windows are decorated in signs bearing the bad news. The industry's hoping over the next few weeks there won't be more of those around town.
And if you were listening to that on radio, check out the video. It'll be on our webpage. Already some of you getting in touch about our interview with Simon from Whitestone Cheese and rapid antigen tests. This person says, Simon from Whitestone Cheese for Prime Minister. Great to hear such a proactive approach to dealing with COVID. Pity they're having to cover the cost of contact tracing. Highlights a huge number of flaws in the government traffic light rat schmozzle. Will says, when people can't stop panic buying toilet paper, I don't think that type of behaviour would change much for rat tests. And also on the subject, we small businesses can't hang on by our fingertips any longer. The New Zealand Chamber of Commerce's message to the government is that every business is critical. It is time to take a vote of no confidence in this government. Do keep your feedback coming, 2101 on the text, or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Recent Gloriavale escapees are among the many New Zealanders banned from practical driving tests because they haven't been vaccinated. It comes as the government continues to face pressure on classing practical driving tests an essential service. It's so far refused to budge on the policy, but now it appears change could be around the corner. Nick Trubridge reports.
As if fleeing Gloriavale isn't difficult enough, recent leavers seeking a new life now face another roadblock. Gloriavale Leavers Support Trust General Manager Liz Gregory says numerous families resettling away from the West Coast community simply can't do so because vaccine mandates mean they can't sit practical driving tests.
We're talking about mums who were really close to getting their licences and have been unable to do their driving tests. Their parents who want to take their children to school. Some are now looking at homeschooling their children. We've just got incidences of younger people wanting to get to jobs and being excluded from being able to get their licences until they've made this vaccination decision.
Now, you may listen to this and think there's an easy solution. Want that licence? Well, line up, get the shot. But for those who have grown up at Gloriavale, Gregory says it isn't quite that simple.
You've been given one source of information your whole life. You come out here, there's a whole lot more information, and leavers are trying to sift through what they believe about certain things all in one instant. And it just, to us, seems really tough and rough that getting your licence could be as a roadblock to their independence.
It's about time that roadblock was removed, she says.
You're trying to piece together your life to all of a sudden have to contemplate perhaps being vaccinated along with everything else that they're going through. It can actually be quite a big ask for them. And so many of them may not be ready to make that step yet, and some are. However, they do need their independence. And having a driver's licence is so essential.
But government policy would suggest it's anything but. Under the red traffic light setting, those who want to take the test must take 2 jabs first. A Waka Kotahi spokesman telling Checkpoint testing is a close contact business, which under the current settings means proof of vaccination is required. And given 95% of eligible New Zealanders are vaccinated, NZTA points out this issue affects less than 5% of those eligible, with many unvaccinated people already holding full licences. Nevertheless, Driving Change Network's Wendy Robertson says the impact on those who can't take the test, whether they be Gloriavale escapees or thousands of others that aren't yet vaccinated, is huge.
Because of their families' beliefs or religious beliefs, they are not able to vaccinate. So although they'd like to have their licence so that they can be mobile and gain employment and things like that, there is pressure on them not to vaccinate.
Driving Change's requests are simple. Deem driver testing an essential service. And Wendy Robertson says that doesn't mean putting assessors at risk, suggesting New Zealand follow the lead of New South Wales and Victoria.
People taking a driving test must either be fully vaccinated or provide a negative rapid antigen test prior to doing the test. In Canada, they also must either be double vaccinated vaccinated or have a negative test, and also wear the mask during the test. So we feel that there are ways around it.
And change could be around the corner. Waka Kotahi this afternoon confirming ministers are aware of this issue and have requested urgent advice on the practicalities of testing unvaccinated applicants.
Queenstown is among places in New Zealand worried the isolation rules and the Omicron outbreak will effectively shut the town down. It's already a reality across the Tasman where small business owners in country towns are reducing trading hours and struggling to make money. They're calling it a shadow lockdown, and retailers say people are so worried about catching Omicron they are only venturing out for essentials. The ABC's Caitlin Gribben reports.
So they'll be in shorts too as well?
Yeah, that's right. It's mid-morning on Palmerin Street in Warwick, 2 hours west of Brisbane. Andrew Cooper, who owns men's and ladies' clothing stores in town, is trying to play it cool when a rare customer walks through the door. Thank you. Yeah, you too. See you later. It's been a lonely few months here on the main drag.
It is depressing to see the street so quiet. It's sad to see that it's going to waste in a sense. You can get till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there's no one parking, there's no customers walking around.
Andrew Cooper's noticing a trend. Locals are worried about venturing out too often and risking catching the highly infectious Omicron variant.
There's no browsing, if that makes sense. It's into the shops, get their groceries, go home. You can just tell they've got a different focus on where they've got to be, what they've got to do, and they just get home.
For retailers in regions who've been through drought, bushfires and now a pandemic, that's devastating.
Even some stores are closing earlier, and I guess that got to do with paying wages too. Paying for staff is difficult, definitely difficult. The true impact of it all is kind of coming out now.
This may not sound much different to what's happening in cities, but in rural and regional centres where health and medical resources are already incredibly stretched, no one wants to add to the load.
Am I going to contribute to my hospital not being able to cope? And is that something that I can avoid by not patronising local businesses where the risk of me contracting COVID may be greater?
Dr Marco Giuseppin is the chair of the Australian Medical Association's Council of Rural Doctors.
It's a bit of a mood of anticipation and maybe a bit of trepidation about perhaps what a major outbreak might mean for their community. There's also a fear in the background there that they may put a strain on their health system, and it's not something that they're keen to do.
The Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry says this is the toughest period rural business has endured since the start of the pandemic. Its chief executive is Andrew McKellar.
In many cases, it's been like a shadow lockdown now for a number of weeks. It's still a very, very challenging situation for many, particularly in the smaller businesses.
No, we don't do that. Yep, thanks. Andrew Cooper would welcome extra support, but knows he'll mostly have to get through this one on his own.
It's hard, obviously, but you've just kind of got to work with what you've got. You've got to compromise, I guess, make it work. Yeah, try different things.
While Kiwis were focused on Winter Olympian Zoi Sadowski-Synnott as she took silver in the snowboard big air event, others have been outraged by the controversy involving one of the competitors in the figure skating. The Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva has been cleared to compete in Beijing, even though she failed a drug test last December. That means she can take to the ice for the upcoming women's singles, one of the most prestigious events in the Olympics, and one she is favoured to win. CNN's Selena Wang reports.
A reprieve for a young Russian figure skater under immense pressure. Kamila Valieva, a favourite to take individual gold at these Olympics, allowed that chance despite her testing positive for a banned drug.
First, the athlete is under 16 and is a protected person under the World Anti-Doping Code. Preventing the athlete to compete at the Olympic Games would cause her irreparable harm.
The timeline here is crucial. Valieva took the test on Christmas Day, but it was only last week that the sample came back positive for the drug trimetazidine, and she and her teammates had already won gold here. The Court of Arbitration for Sport said Monday that the minor has not had enough time to defend herself, so the issue is kicked on down the road. Valieva will still compete here while a full investigation is done. The team could still be stripped of her medals in the coming months. In the meantime, the IOC says it would not be appropriate to award her any medals. All eyes are on Kamila Valieva here in Beijing, but she's only 15 years old. The World Anti-Doping Agency says it will investigate her entourage, the adults around her that may have pressured her into taking the banned substance. A glimpse behind the glimmering surface into the murky world of Russian sports, which has been accused of state-sponsored doping and extreme pressure on very young athletes. Team USA not holding back in a statement. This appears to be another chapter in the systematic and pervasive disregard for clean sport by Russia. The Russian Figure Skating Federation president labeling the decision common sense and justice, while the IOC condemned any use of performance-enhancing drugs. How should clean athletes feel about the decision that is made?
The system, I'm afraid, is slow. Justice, I'm afraid the wheels of justice do run slowly. We would like them to run faster so that there would be clarity for everybody involved, for all of the athletes.
Inescapable is the fact that clean athletes will line up Tuesday against a competition favorite who tested positive once. At an Olympics dogged by politics and China's rights record, this doping scandal tainting the sport here as well.
Let's get to some of your feedback on the protest in Wellington. It rolls on, well into its second week at this stage, and the police commissioner is indicating that they're about to tow vehicles, but local tow companies weren't that interested in helping out. This says very disappointing that Wellington tow truck operators do not want to help their local community. Pauline reckons the army needs to tow unlawful vehicles because protesters have threatened private tow truck drivers. They've spurned offers of alternative parking, and Wellingtonians have rights too, says Pauline. And this one, take action against the protesters who think their right to protest is above the rights of individuals and businesses to live their own lives. If I walk down the street breaking the law, the police would take action. Same should apply to the protesters. They're not convincing anyone at all. On the new self-isolation rules, this person says, for goodness sake, these new self-isolation rules will be a super spreader. The majority will not stay isolated for timeframes, as the government seems to think, yet more lessons not learned from Australia. And on the vaccine pass for driving, and whether you should have to present a vaccine certificate to do your practical test, this person says a vaccine pass should not be required for a practical driving test. And another listener says, I really feel sorry for hospital, especially in Auckland, but honestly, what can you do? No government would get this right. We're all doing our best in trying to navigate constant change.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Good evening. Kia ora tātou, ko Ivy Ashton tēnei. The Police Commissioner says it's likely vehicles blocking the roads in Wellington would have been towed sooner if they had the resources. Andrew Costa today gave vehicle owners an ultimatum, telling them to move their cars or they'll be towed and not able to be retrieved for some time. However, he admits more towing companies are needed to move the almost 200 vehicles.
From the outset of this, I had very great reluctance from tow operators to support us in clearing this situation. So part of what we would like to do today is to appeal to those who are tow operators to come forward and help us sort this out.
The Defence Force says it was approached last week by police asking what assistance could be provided to help tow away illegally parked vehicles, but a spokesperson says no decisions have been made about its involvement. The Prime Minister denies the police have lost control of the protest outside Parliament as it shows no sign of abating in its 8th day. Jacinda Ardern says the police are focused on ensuring everyone's safety.
We have, of course, all seen the reports of the abuse that people are receiving for simply wearing a mask, the intimidation. Businesses are really facing difficulties with people feeling safe to come and go. And that, of course, has been passed on directly to police, and police are looking to address that.
The National Party has endorsed the Prime Minister's decision to refuse to engage or negotiate with the protesters. A media statement issued from some of the protest groups at Parliament says they're actively engaging with the police. The statement, issued on behalf of half a dozen groups, including Voices for Freedom, says there are a variety of views held by those on Parliament's lawn, but all are united in demanding the end of vaccine mandates. The statement says they've been working with police on traffic management and are mindful of public safety and minimising disruption to those living and working in Wellington. It It comes just a few hours after the police said protesters have so far unheeded calls to move vehicles around Parliament. Snowboarder Zoi Sadowski-Synnott accepts it's going to take some time to fully realise what she's achieved at the Beijing Winter Olympics. The 20-year-old from Wanaka today won a silver in the snowboard big air event to go with the gold she won in the slopestyle last week. Sadowski-Synnott led after the first 2 rounds of competition, but failed to land her final jump and was edged out by defending champion Austrian Anna Gasser.
Been in this crazy Olympic bubble environment and I can't really process it right now, but I'm sure that once I get home and see my family and friends, it'll all kind of sink in.
Zoi Sadowski-Synnott's parents, Sean and Robin, watched on in Wanaka and say she has nerves of steel.
It was a really clean run. She was very composed, huge amount of height, amplitude as they call, and just really impressed with the fact she could just pull it out of the bag again.
Zoi Sadowski-Synnott's father, Sean. The COVID-19 response minister says it'll be up to individual returnees to decide if they need to temporarily leave self-isolation. Under new government rules, some returnees can get a temporary pass out of self-isolation to visit a terminally ill relative, go to court or get medical attention. Chris Hipkins has told Checkpoint it'll be up to those in self-isolation to decide for themselves if they need to leave before the required 7 days is up.
That's right, but you'd have to be, in order to not be committing an offence or committing an infringement, you'd need to be doing it consistent with the guidance that's been put out around what you could leave for and why and so on.
Chris Hipkins says it's still important people isolate, even in the face of rising cases in the community, to slow the spread of the virus. New Zealand's new COVID case numbers have dropped from yesterday's record. There are another 744 COVID-19 cases in the community today, compared to yesterday's 981 infections. And North Power expects some customers in Te Tai Tokiro will spend another night without power. Poles, overhead lines and transformers were damaged by 150 km/h gusts, fallen trees and debris. North Power says 100 customers were without electricity this afternoon, down from 6,000 on Sunday. More than 150 workers have been repairing connections, but some properties will still be in the dark overnight. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Brian Roper brings his mainly Marxist perspective to bear on an issue of note. Whether that'll be the housing crisis or the Freedom Convoy, we're not sure. Perhaps the latter is a radical solution to the former. We've got a window on the word of constipation, while social researcher Tony White talks about her job at Plant and Food Research, linking plant science with the people. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
You're back with Lisa Owen momentarily on Checkpoint. First, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Wednesday. For Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo and Taumarunui. Fine, some cloud in the west tomorrow morning. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, mainly fine. Isolated showers this afternoon and again tomorrow afternoon and evening. For Whanganui and Taihape to Kapiti Coast, fine apart from patchy drizzle tomorrow morning. Wellington and Wairarapa, mainly fine. Areas of morning and evening cloud tomorrow. For Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland, fine and cloudy periods. Isolated showers developing in Westland and Buller tomorrow. Canterbury, the Southern Lakes, Central and North Otago and Dunedin. Fine today, scattered rain tomorrow morning, clearing to fine tomorrow afternoon, but the odd shower lingering about the Canterbury high country. Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, rain about southern Fiordland and Stewart Island, spreading elsewhere this evening, becoming fine tomorrow morning. And for the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy with the odd shower. It's 6 minutes past 6. We'll have more news headlines for you at 6:30.
Thanks, Evie. No mai, haere mai. This is Checkpoint called Lisa Owen TNA. Snowboarder Zoi Sadowski-Synnott has made history once again, becoming our first athlete to win multiple medals at a Winter Olympics. She secured silver in the big air competition this afternoon, adding to the gold she won in the women's slopestyle last week and a bronze she won in Pyeongchang in 2018 when she was just 16. Zoe is fresh off the slopes and joins us now live from Beijing. Zoe, way to go. Are you still floating on air after that?
Thank you so much. I'm super stoked and can't really believe it, winning 2 medals in one games. But yeah, had a pretty sick teams behind me and couldn't have done it without them.
What does it mean to you?
It means a lot to me, like growing up snowboarding and dreaming of going to the Olympics and now walking away with 2 medals. I'm just so happy and proud of where my snowboarding's gone, and I hope I made my family proud.
Yeah, they are super proud of you. What were you telling yourself going into this before you went on your first run?
Yeah, I would just tell myself to take care of the snowboarding first and let the performance and the snowboarding speak for itself, and then whatever result I got, just as long as I was stoked with how I was riding, I'd be happy.
They're underselling it, Zoe, when they call it the big air, aren't they? It's the enormous death-defying leap into the abyss, isn't it? So tell us about how you just hurl yourself off that thing that is so high.
Yeah, the big air is a pretty big jump, and we got 3 days of practice before going into the comp because you kind of need it with how big the jump is. You need to know exactly what you're doing. And it's big enough so that we can do 1080s and 1260s. So, yeah, pretty fun.
Do you feel any fear at all?
Yeah, definitely feel fear, but when you're going into a competition, you need to trust yourself. So I did that when I was going into my last run, and I ended up falling, but it was all good because gave it a crack and pretty stoked to stand on the podium with 2 of my friends.
Yeah, tell us about that third run. So the hammer's down, right? And the Austrian has just pulled one right out of the bag. You're standing up there on the top of that massive slope, about to do that run, and you pull out a new trick.
Yeah, I learnt that trick a month and a half ago, and I wanted to do it on my third run regardless of if Anna had knocked me out. And, I gave it a crack, but I took way too much speed into it because I was a bit too excited and couldn't quite ride out of it and put it down, but still stoked to give it a go and still end up on the podium.
So that was your strategy, Zoe, just to pour it all out there on that third run, no matter the risk, just to go for it.
Yeah, definitely. Like, the Olympics, got to do your best tricks, and those are my best tricks. So bummed I couldn't put that last one down, but stoked I gave it a go.
How many kind of wipeouts or injuries have you had leading up to the Olympics?
Yeah, I've had a few little minor injuries, but I had a tibial plateau fracture about 6 weeks before flying overseas, and it delayed my trip a bit, so it kind of knocked me off my flow going into the season, but paced myself, I think, pretty good, and kind of looked at things from a bigger picture, and it ended up working out well, and I'm feeling strong and healthy, so pretty happy.
So what happens now? Do you get to come home?
Nah, I'm headed to BC in Canada to go do natural selection tour. It's a free ride snowboard competition and ride some power and have fun with friends. So, going to do that and then maybe come home for my brother's wedding.
So how do you celebrate in a really tight bubble at the Olympics? What are you going to do?
I don't really know yet. Going to have to figure that one out, and then, I'll let you know.
Absolutely stellar effort, Zoe. Thank you for joining us. That is Zoi Sadowski-Synnott, who's won 2 medals at the Olympics, got a silver today with a phenomenal run from a very high height. You need to check it out if you haven't seen it. The foundational right of New Zealanders to return home versus the proportionate response to the risks the country faced. The 2 key arguments that have been debated in the High Court in Wellington over the last couple of days as the group Grounded Kiwis takes on the government over the MIQ system. It's a policy that's resulted in heartbreak for thousands of offshore Kiwis forced to play the MIQ lottery to get a ticket home. Now, the hearing was wrapped up and a group of grounded Kiwis is gathering in the capital. Our reporter Nita Plate-Person joins us now from there. Nita, how's everybody feeling about how the case went?
It's been a big couple of days, Lisa. I think maybe a little bit of relief that it's all over, but to actually tell us how they're feeling, I'm joined by Alexandra Burt, who was the only grounded Kiwis spokesperson able to be in the court today when everything got scaled back. She joins me now. Good evening, Alexandra. How are you feeling after everything?
Yeah, good, thank you. A bit exhausted, I think, is probably understandable, but yeah, a great sense of relief, and I think pride with where we've got to as an organisation, and the fact that we, a bunch of volunteers from all around the globe, together with our supporters, have been able to bring this case.
It has been an ordeal from all around the globe. Can you take me through what the feedback you've been getting, as well as there's been a lot of financial support too, hasn't there?
Yeah, definitely. So we brought this case funded entirely by crowdfunding. So we launched a crowdfunding campaign when we filed the case back in October, and very quickly reached our initial target, which then transpired we needed more and very quickly exceeded that. So we've raised over $197,000 to cover our legal fees, which has been donated by over 1,500 donors. Our group membership exceeds 17,000 now. So we are representing a lot of people, and I think a lot of people have been really supportive and encouraging of the action. We posted on Facebook to announce the beginning of the trial yesterday, and just the hundreds and hundreds of comments from people were really both humbling and motivating, I guess, in terms of how they're feeling and the fact that this is finally getting its day in court.
A lot of people were watching online through that live stream that was put up and things like that, and it's been a big couple of days. How confident are you now feeling about your chances?
So I think it's always difficult to tell at this stage. I feel like we've given it the best shot that we possibly could. We've had fantastic support from our barristers. Paul Radich QC and Lucilla Van Dam have been an invaluable asset to us, and we're so grateful for their efforts and support. So I think now it's just a case of we've done the best we can, and we'll wait and see what the judge decides.
The Crown put forward their case today, and one of the comments was that grounded Kiwis, obviously they conceded that there had been a lot of heartache in the stories, and were quite grateful for the affidavits and things like that. But they said that grounded Kiwis had overstated the situation. What's your response to that?
I think that was probably one of the hardest things to sit there in court and listen to today. Obviously, we've got this group of 17,000. It's run fully by volunteers who devoted countless hours to supporting people. I personally have received hundreds, if not thousands, of messages from people who are struggling and unable to get back. The impacts that it has had on these people is just enormous. So to have the Crown say that, we've just provided a couple of affidavits of, possibly the worst stories, just again was a real kick in the guts, I guess. And I think for people that were able to watch the live stream, that was one of the comments that we got back, that was really hard to hear.
Just lastly, MIQ, as we know, is about to be massively scaled back, almost redundant as we move into home isolation in this next phase. Why pursue this, and why keep going with this case?
Yeah, so I think this case is extremely important for a number of reasons. One, we haven't actually, as we saw last time when the announcement was made, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a done deal. So even though we're very, very hopeful that the borders will open at the end of the month and sort of mid-March for the rest of the world, that hasn't happened yet. So we think it's still important that the case proceeds. And the other point is from a precedent-setting perspective. What was mentioned in court today was, having a yardstick, something that to say, if this situation were to happen again, or if this pandemic develops, is it acceptable for a government to lock out its citizens in this way, and for people to be delayed returning for such long periods of time?
We'll stand by for that decision. Thank you so much for your time tonight. That was Alexandra Burt from Grounded Kiwis, who's joined by some other grounded Kiwis who've been part of this ordeal at Foxglove Bar in Wellington tonight to kind of debrief about how it's all gone. As I said, the decision has been reserved, Lisa, so we'll be standing by to see what's made of that judicial review and the outcome of the law, the legal ruler, as it were, being run over the government's MIQ system.
Thanks, Nita. That's Nita Blake-Pearson, our reporter, joining us live from Wellington. It is 16 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Well, to keep up with your COVID response, we've had to get our heads around levels and traffic lights, and now it's phases. The move to phase 2 tonight is only a few hours away. Self-isolation times will be cut, contact tracing will be more tech-based, and close contact definitions will loosen. But businesses are crying out for access to rapid antigen tests. Sam Ollie reports.
New Zealanders around the country are getting their heads around phase 2. Some reactions in Whangarei today.
I'm not 100% sure what phase 2 inquires. Trying to minimise the spread is not a bad thing.
I don't know. I'm hospitality myself, so I don't think it really affects. Well, we've been doing the whole scan and blah 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 anyway when Northern red zones. Yeah, so is that right?
We don't really know a hell of a lot apart from, I think they're going to be more, you've got to use those apps more often. We'll find out tomorrow, I suppose.
They must be working on advice that I don't always have access to. So we just have to trust that they're following the advice they're given.
Do you know much about what phase 2 means?
I've let it blow over me.
But microbiologist Dr. Susie Wiles says phase 2 isn't as complicated as people think.
Lots of people are confused by all the phases and the red lights and everything. So the red light traffic light system remains the same. The phases is just about how the contact tracing is done and isolation times.
New Zealand Statistical Association President Dr. Matthew Parry says this week's positivity rate, the proportion of tested people getting a positive result, is telling.
That rolling average has reached 2.6% today, so that's much higher than we've seen before. So it indicates definitely that something is different this time round.
Dr. Parry says random survey testing could complement wastewater testing when contact tracing struggles.
For instance, in the United Kingdom, the Office of National Statistics runs a weekly survey where they send out tests to people with sort of free post return envelopes. People take tests and then return it. And that way, the UK can get an idea of what the prevalence is in the population, and that can be very useful information.
Although phase 2 cuts isolation times from 14 days to 10 days for cases and to 7 days for close contacts, Hospitality New Zealand Chief Executive Julie White has grave concerns for members trying to hold on in red. She says although we aren't in lockdown, businesses aren't seeing the patronage they did pre-COVID.
Never have we seen the tap turned off from customers, and that's the biggest significance we're seeing. People are so scared that they've actually stopped coming out.
In Hospitality New Zealand's latest survey, more than half of members say they will shut in the next 3 months if revenue doesn't lift. University of Otago business lecturer Dr. Paula O'Kane is a co-owner of a hospitality business.
People just don't know what they're going to do whenever one person tests positive. They just feel the only option is that they're going to have to close down their entire business for up to, even at the minute with the 7 and 10 days, it could end up 17 days, 2 weeks. And then if it reoccurs again, if people don't actually get COVID whenever they're self-isolating, it could happen over and over again. And so people are really worried about how they're actually going to open.
Dr. O'Kane says access to rapid antigen tests will allay some of these concerns, but small businesses employ a third of New Zealand workers, and she thinks the government needs to start the COVID resurgence payment again to avoid more businesses going to the wall. Currently, access to rapid antigen tests is limited to businesses the government has deemed critical, like health and infrastructure services. Applications opened last week, but Auckland Chamber of Commerce Chief Executive Michael Barnett says the divide between critical and non-critical is wrong.
It discriminates one group against the other. What I'm saying is that all businesses should be treated the same and all employees should be treated the same.
The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment says nearly 7,000 businesses have applied for critical status.
Isolation requirements for those entering the country from Australia are about to become much more flexible. A 7-day isolation period will begin at the end of the month for vaccinated New Zealanders travelling from Australia. The government's announced they need to head straight from the airport to their accommodation with no stops on the way and to wear a mask. However, those isolating can form a bubble with family or friends who can continue to go to work or school. No visitors will be allowed and they must minimise contact with others as much as possible. The COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins says the changes reflect the country entering a new phase of the COVID response.
There will be cases in the community, and where someone getting on a plane from Auckland to Wellington it may well be just as likely to have COVID-19 as someone getting off an international flight and getting on that same flight. So we have to get used to the fact that there will be more risk in the community, and therefore the relative risk of people coming in from internationally isn't what it used to be.
The changes will also cut the red tape around temporarily leaving isolation in special circumstances.
Those who are self-isolating will be able to leave self-isolation in order to be able to go and visit dying relatives, and there won't be a big formal process around that in the way that there has been up till now.
Some eligible groups approved by Sports New Zealand or the Ministry of Culture and Heritage will be able to train or rehearse outside of their place of self-isolation. The Minister also said there will be a time when the self-isolation requirements will not be needed, but wouldn't say what the threshold would be. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has declared Wednesday a day of national unity after US intelligence suggested that could be the day Russian forces attack. Addressing the nation, Mr. Zelensky said Ukraine wants peace, but also has a wonderful and strong army. The United States is moving its embassy staff away from the Ukrainian capital Kiev to Lviv in the west of the country. It's also warned that Moscow is increasing its military deployments at the border. The BBC's Sarah Rainsford is in Kiev.
Russia is still building up its forces, parading its potential near Ukraine's border. So much so that Western governments are saying an invasion could be launched within days now. The war warnings coming thick and fast. So Volodymyr Zelensky has addressed the nation, assuring Ukrainians their country is confident, stronger than ever, that Russia is trying to scare them, but they won't succumb. And the talks to defuse this crisis have been intensifying. Today it was the German Chancellor's turn in town, showing support for Kiev, seeking ways to get Russia to pull back its troops. President Zelensky underlined that won't be by Ukraine dropping its right to join NATO. Tomorrow, the German leader heads to Moscow.
I'm making it clear once again here in Kiev that Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity are non-negotiable for Germany. We therefore expect Russia to take clear steps to de-escalate the current tensions.
In Russia, the foreign minister was shown urging President Putin to keep talking to the West. It is worth it, he said. But Boris Johnson spoke to the US president today too, and both are still sounding the alarm.
We are on the edge of a precipice, but there is still time for President Putin to step back. And what we're urging is for everybody to engage in dialogue, for a conversation to take place, and for the Russians to avoid what I think everybody, certainly everybody in the UK, can see would be a disastrous mistake.
It can be hard to make a connection between all the politicians' warning of imminent all-out war, even the bombing of this city, Kiev, and how things actually feel here on the ground. Because even as the negotiations, the diplomacy continue, so does life here pretty much as normal.
With the protesters at Parliament showing no signs of moving on, the police are again urging people to move their cars off the streets of Wellington. In Canada, where massive demonstrations have been taking place, authorities will now be able to block the bank accounts of anti-vaccine mandate protesters without going to court. It's among a number of options for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who has invoked emergency powers to crack down on demonstrations which are in their third week. Mr. Trudeau says it's about keeping Canadians safe and protecting their jobs.
Invoking the Emergencies Act is never the first thing a government should do, nor even the second. The Act is to be used sparingly and as a last resort. Right now, the situation requires additional tools not held by any other federal, provincial, or territorial law.
And the BBC's David Willis has more.
It's only the second time in Canadian history that it's measures of this kind have been implemented in peacetime. The political optics of this for Justin Trudeau are somewhat sketchy. These measures enable the government to override constitutional rights, and of course he has long been one who's campaigned and championed the human rights of his citizens. Mr. Trudeau has said that he is not intending to bring in the army, to bring in military troops at this stage, but by invoking the Emergency Act, he will basically be giving the police powers to augment their ranks, to have greater powers to arrest people and to clear the blockades. They will also be new powers conferred under this Act, for example, to block the insurance of certain truck drivers who were involved in these blockades, and the ability to freeze the bank accounts of those who are using crowdfunding platforms to finance these measures that are going on in Canada. Mr. Trudeau said it was essential to do this in the interests of national security.
Parents in the United States eager to get their toddlers vaccinated against COVID are being told they may have to wait months for the Federal Drug Administration to approve the jab for little ones. It's causing increased anxiety as mask mandates in school are rapidly being scrapped across the country. CNN's Alexandra Field reports.
The wait for those who want a vaccine for the youngest children drags on, fueling frustration among parents.
They're going to continue to have to remain vigilant if they're concerned about the risk of infection.
The FDA announcing it will wait for more data before considering emergency use authorization for vaccines for children under 5. Pfizer and BioNTech say they expect to have data on a 3-dose regimen available in early April. That as more cities and states announce plans to abandon more pandemic-related precautions, though the CDC still has yet to issue new guidance on lifting restrictions.
I think what you're going to see the CDC do, though, is come out with guidance that's more specific to communities, that's based on what the local prevalence is. And that's probably where they should have been all along.
New COVID cases are the lowest they've been since December, averaging fewer than 200,000 daily. But with an average of more than 2,300 Americans still dying daily, the federal government is pumping money into COVID therapies. The Army striking an $855 million deal for AstraZeneca's antibody cocktail, which has seemed to work well against Omicron for people who are immunocompromised or can't be vaccinated. The Biden administration also working to deliver where needed other treatments that are still in short supply.
We continue to encourage every governor to do everything they can to make sure their citizens don't get sick and need these treatments. And the more they do all the preventative measures, vaccination, masking, testing, the more they can assure themselves that they won't need these treatments later on as dramatically.
The only surviving portion of a federal vaccine mandate takes effect today, requiring the first shot of a vaccine for healthcare workers in 24 states not previously covered by vaccine mandates. The Supreme Court upholding the mandate, which applies to facilities that receive federal funding, in a ruling last month.
And the final word on the protest at Parliament goes to Bob tonight. Bob says it's okay to protest against the government, but these people are taking the piss out of New Zealanders. Definitely untenable, and hopefully it will be resolved before the inevitable backlash from Kiwis occurs, says Bob. That's it from us. The Late News team will keep you updated throughout the night. If you missed anything from the show, you can find Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi a pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. A defiant tow truck driver tells First Up he and his mates won't move the cars illegally parked around Parliament because they sympathise with the protesters. Kaua e wariwari te atatira I a mātou kōrero. Heaps of good stories and videos online. Check them out on our webpage. Kei te hoki mai anō a pōpō whānau po Mārie.
RNZ News headlines, kia ora tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Snowboarder Zoi Sadowski-Synnott says she's super stoked to win 2 medals in one Olympic Games after she took silver in the big air competition. She told Checkpoint that she put way too much speed into her final run, which lost her the gold, but she had to bring her best trick to the Olympics. The White Ferns have survived a close run chase to beat India by 3 wickets in the second cricket one-dayer in Queenstown. And police say it's likely vehicles